Baxter, I think so far you've given us an excellent overview.
Thank you.
In terms of African participation in politics. But let's be specific in terms of the period immediately after the war, when all of these slaves came out of slavery, and then how education was important in reference to.
Right after the Civil War, these freedmen, they were enfranchised by way of congressional reconstruction that had been imposed across the South. The Congress passed the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment. It was those amendments, the 13th and 14th, the 13th gave the vote to African American males. The 14th, not only did it give the vote, but it gave to the freedmen or people of color equal protection under the law. And then the 15th declared citizenship. With the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, and with the Republicans controlling Congress, they imposed those amendments, and the South had to ratify and make those amendments a part of their state constitutions. Now, because of the party of Abe Lincoln being the Republican Party and congressional reconstruction, now a people of color living in the southern region of these United States can now run for public office. They could also vote. What party then did they join? It was the Republican Party, because Abe Lincoln's emancipation, and then of course the passing of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Now, as a result of this, then blacks now, not only will they vote, they begin to hold public office. Most of these politicians were free men, even before the Civil War. When we look at men the caliber of Hiram Revels, Bruce Blanche, Robert Elliott, Joseph Rainey, these were educated men serving in their state legislatures, holding public office in other areas of the South, but in their particular state. If we look at the great state of Louisiana, PBS Pinchback, he served a very short tenure as lieutenant governor, and he would go on to serve as governor. When we look at the effectiveness of these black legislators, these black politicians, when we look at them in their respective states, during this post-Civil War period, we had 600 people of color, men of color, serving in their state legislatures. When we look across the region of the South, we had 1,500 African Americans serving in their state legislatures, serving and being appointed to hold public office. And yes, we even had some serving in our federal government. So blacks made most noted contributions serving as elected officials. When we look at some of the legislations, well, they focused on public schools. Public schools came by way of the Reconstruction government. When we look at infrastructure, government services provided to states and local governments came by way of the Reconstruction government. And most of these politicians were people of color, and they were people who had been restored back into their proper place as a result of satisfying all of the qualifications deemed necessary for them to become enfranchised again.
And so, in a real sense, they played a significant role in terms of just the whole American political process itself. Well, now, at one time, many of them were disfranchised. I mean, what about that? I mean, I think we often hear about Africans who participated for a long time, but for whatever reason, we were almost eliminated from the process for many, many years. What about that?
Well, what happened was we have to look at the election. We have to look at the election of 1876. That election was thrown into the House of Representatives. It was Samuel Tilden, the Democratic candidate, versus Rutherford B. Hayes. When the election went into the House of Representatives in the year 1886, then the following year, there was a compromise. It becomes known as the Compromise of 1877. As a result of the compromise, Rutherford B. Hayes becomes the President of the United States. The federal government, at the time of his election by way of a compromise, the nation was faced with so many other problems. President Rutherford B. Hayes and the Congress felt that they had done all they could do for the South and for the problems of the Negro. And not only did the Negro have problems, there was a grass-rooted population of poor whites in the South as well. But because of the other issues addressing these United States of America, it was decided as a result of the compromise that the federal government would pull the last of the remaining federal troops out of the South. Now, when that happened, the South is officially restored or admitted back into the Union, that is, every southern state. People of color in those states are left at the disposal of their white southern counterparts. And I'm speaking mainly those ex-Confederate officials that fought against the Union, but are now restored back in their proper place within the Union by way of their state. They are now enfranchised, and they will be elected back to their state legislatures, back to the Congress and so forth and so on in the local government.
Almost everything's forgiven.
Yes, sir, everything is forgiven. Now, as a result of that, each state, each legislature began to impose black codes. Each state legislature will begin to reverse the status of people of color in their respective states. Blacks are denied the right to vote. Blacks can no longer hold public office. Many, many issues will affect people of color in southern states. And then, of course, 1896, the United States Supreme Court rules on the Plessy versus Ferguson's case, which legalizes Jim Crow. Now, as a result of Jim Crow, in the southern region of the United States, blacks have no representatives at any level of government, be it federal, state, local. So now we are at the disposal of white Southerners. They will establish two different worlds by way of Jim Crow, one black, one white.
Okay, and let us stop here at that particular point for this final commercial break.
Sure.
And then we'll give you an opportunity to continue this during this last segment. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.